I play outside all year round. I always have, and they would have us shoveling the snow off the pitch before trainings.
Hello, and welcome to the Kick It with Katie podcast. Hey team, it's Katie here, and today I have Abby Carchio, and she is the other half of the Megged Podcast. So welcome, Abby, and why don't you go ahead and just start telling us how you got into soccer, where you grew up, where you're from, and yeah, just take it from there.
Thanks, Katie, so much for having me on. Very excited to be the complimentary half of Sydney's podcast. So my story is pretty classic. You know, as a child, I was put into every sport known to man. And my siblings also played soccer, so it was very normal for us to just be at the soccer pitch all day, every day. Fell in love with it at an early age, 5 years old. Played for my youth teams until about 13, and that's when I got really serious about it. Entered into a club team. I played my club football at NEFC, which is a local team in Massachusetts, where I'm from. I played at that club all the way up through high school. I also did play for my high school team as well. So a lot of football at that time. And so after high school, I was really looking into playing collegiately, as most of us do. I was fortunate enough to be recruited to Brown University, where Sydney also played, and that's how we met. My recruiting process was probably very different from what it is today, just because of the rule changes and how often coaches can communicate. But back then, I was recruited in 2014, I think. So coaches were allowed to really talk to you at any point, at any age. And so I was talking with a few different Ivy League schools, Providence College as well, staying local because I wanted my parents to see my games, but ultimately decided to go to Brown. The coach there at the time who was recruiting me actually finished out his year the year before I came. And so I actually came into Brown University with a coach that didn't recruit me. It was very nerve-wracking, had no idea who this woman was. And it turned out to be the best coaching situation that I could walk into. Kia McNeil, who is still the coach at Brown University now, they had a great year. Spent my 4 years there with Kia and her great coaching staff. I learned so much, was really pushed academically and soccer-wise. My love for the game really deepened throughout my college career.
Yeah, and that I know I've had some players that have been on here previously that kind of had a similar situation where either they got recruited by a different coach and then ended up playing the whole time under a different coach, or they were recruited and for 1 or 2 years they played for the coach that recruited them and then ended up having a different coach in the end, and whether that was a good or a bad situation for them, however they saw it. But for you, obviously it turned out really well, and Kia, you said is still there. So she's obviously been there for almost 10 years, it sounds like. So what are some of the good memories that you have from there? Because I know that when you played at Brown, that's when you met Sydney, but what are some other great memories? Because I think Sydney mentioned you were captain?
Yep. Yeah. So, man, I had a diverse 4 years at Brown. So there were a lot of hardships. I'm definitely somewhat of a head case, as Sydney might have touched on, not sure. But yeah, I definitely grew a lot in the mental space. And I think that was one of the highlights. It was one of the hardest things, but it was also something that I value so deeply now. But in terms of soccer, we spent 4 years building that program, Kia and the players that came before me. It was not easy. We came in 6th place one year. There were a lot of roadblocks to overcome. But my senior year, all of those pieces kind of aligned. We finally established this great culture. I was fortunate enough to be voted captain that year with Sydney and our other co-captain, Celia Story. And we were so intentional about everything we did that year. We had a great group of girls, very talented squad, and we were able to take home the first championship in 25 years, I believe. So my entire life, they hadn't won before that. but we finally got that Ivy League championship ring. And that was the first of four. So now Kia McNeil has taken them to four consecutive titles with that gap COVID year. But yeah, that really meant a lot to me emotionally because I felt as though I put in everything I could to that program for 4 years. And I definitely got everything that I put in, I got out from that program as well. Like they gave me so much in terms of like mental growth, personal growth, and of course, football growth.
Mm-hmm. And when you were playing youth soccer, obviously you said that you started to take it more seriously. So, was your ultimate goal to play collegiate? And then did you want to play professionally after that? Or was it kind of like, we'll see where it goes after this type of a thing? What were your thoughts on your soccer career?
Yeah, so at 13, you're quite naive. You're not really sure of the socioeconomic standings of women in sports. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was ready to go pro at 13. I was like, oh, this is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
Idolizing Abby Wambach and Mia Hamm, like these great players at the time. And so I always knew I wanted to play collegiately. Professional was always the dream, but it was kind of not realistic at the time because of like
Mm-hmm.
the time away from it that I was. But yeah, at 13 I started club, but the other thing that I invested in was private training. So I have a private trainer who I still work with, Brandon McClay, and without him I wouldn't be anywhere near the professional game and even the collegiate game. I think working with him every week on technical skills, mental skills, and physical skills really allowed me to take football more seriously and to yeah, take the next step and get into a more serious line of work.
And you had also mentioned that part of the reason why you chose the school that you did was because it was close to your parents. Were there other options for you on other areas of the country, or were you only looking locally so that you could stay close to home?
Yeah, I had a few schools down south who were interested in me, but I melt in the heat because I'm a New England girl. So honestly, practically, it wasn't the best move for me, but it was really important for me to stay close to my family. My parents and my family have supported me since age 5, missing birthday parties, missing who knows what. So yeah, it was important that they were able to come to all of my games. But also, I think New England has some really strong academic schools, and so that was important to me as well as football is my first love, but I knew the importance of academics as well.
And what degree were you seeking when you went to college?
It's funny, when I went into college, I had this plan of going to law school throughout my professional career. I have no idea why I thought that. So I was a like free law poli sci major going in, but ended up with a history degree, and came out with much more of an entrepreneurial spirit than poli sci or law, to be honest.
That's funny. I actually had considered going to law school. I was like, okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to get my undergrad, and then I'm going to transfer to this school, and I'm going to go get my law degree at this school. So none of that came to fruition, in case anybody's wondering. um, but yeah, that's pretty funny. Because that was my big plan too. I was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. I watched a whole lot of Law and Order and CSI and those types of shows. So I was like, I'm either gonna be a lawyer or a criminalist. I didn't really like science, and I don't know really how well I do around blood, like for crime scenes and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll do a little bit more court stuff, like paralegal, maybe. I don't know. So that was my idea, which again did not come to fruition. So for anybody wondering, that didn't happen. I do this now. I do soccer stuff,
Which is way
which
more fun, way more
yeah,
fun.
it is. It is. I definitely enjoy it. Having a history degree, I mean, I loved history. I took AP history and all that in high school history. So now that you're in Europe, because you are currently in Denmark, I almost said Germany again. You're in Denmark. We've been over that. So how has that been? I mean, just being able to be in such a historical culture environment over there with your degree, and then we'll talk about how you got over there.
Yeah, yeah. Being in Europe is something else, really. I mean, you can't compare it to America. I think America has some pros, but yeah, in terms of culture, Europe is just saturated in it. And I've been fortunate enough to play in 4 different countries professionally, and so I'm kind of at this confluence of different cultures, and I'm able to extract the positives and negatives from those cultures. But in terms of history, yeah, I was in France for a year and a half, and French Revolution was one of the staples in high school
Mm-hmm.
history class. So yeah, it was nice to like fact check and then disprove some of the things that I thought were true back in the day. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been nice.
That's fun. So after college, you've obviously stated, you've played professionally. So tell us how you got into whether you were recruited, you tried out. How did you get your foot in the door going into women's professional soccer?
Yeah, it was a bit tricky because I graduated in 2020, which was obviously the COVID year.
Mm-hmm.
So I did put my name in the draft, didn't get into the draft, but that was kind of the kick in the butt I needed to be like, okay, got to take my game to the next level in order to play in the highest leagues. And so, yeah, trained a lot during that COVID period when you couldn't see anybody, you couldn't train with the team. Got myself into good shape. I found an agent at that time, and as soon as borders started opening up, I was fortunate enough to sign a contract with a Champions League team in Lithuania, of all places. Very
Hmm.
random spot, but
Yeah.
it was the perfect stepping stone to get my foot in the professional game. And so I bounced around to four different teams throughout the last 4 years. And yeah, it's been a trialing experience, but yeah, really eye opening and amazing cultural experience in terms of my football development.
So tell the listeners, so you went to Lithuania first. So tell us what countries have you gone to? And then as far as like breaks and coming back to the States during breaks or things like that, like how has that been?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic that Sid and I have talked about on our podcast because I think it's so pertinent. But in terms of my countries, so I went to Lithuania for a bit. I was in Iceland, which was absolutely freezing. It's a perfect place to go on vacation for a week, but I wouldn't suggest living there for more than a week. Then I went to France, which I did the majority of my professional football in. I played there for a year and a half at a team called Saint Etienne. And then recently I transferred to a team called Fortuna Joring in Denmark. And so, yeah, like you said, it's been a 4 year period. There are definitely breaks coming home. We have off season. And I would say for women's football in general, this is a really challenging issue. Obviously, when we come home, there isn't this uniform training system that the men have. Like, you don't necessarily have these individual training platforms and things like that that you can utilize when you're home, a gym, even. And so it's always been a challenge to come home and find a team to train with. Oftentimes, I train with men's pickup leagues. I mentioned Brandon, my trainer, so it's been great to have him. But especially during the COVID periods, it was really hard to find field space to train on my own, but most importantly, to find a high quality team to train with. Because you do have a lot of these like pickup leagues and things like that for women, but the quality is not at the standard that we need at the professional level. So yeah, I turned to men's leagues and Wednesday night footballs with the guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that would definitely be very difficult to go from such a high level and then you come back and to be with your family and stuff, but you still want to maintain that high level. So it's really difficult not to be able to have access to that. I could definitely see the issues with that. I know we were just watching I keep mentioning this because I just happen to have just watched an episode of Wrexham and Welcome to Wrexham. And one of the players on there, he had taken time off because of family stuff. And I was just like, it's really interesting to see like a player that had something like that happen where they go and, they're on holiday or they're taking like for him, it was a family medical emergency type of a situation. And I'm like, I assume that they don't not train physically, like, but they're just not training with a team, and he's like, well, it's really hard when you're not training with a team consistently. Like, it's different. It's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. So while you can keep your foot skills and stuff sharp, it's really hard to maintain that rhythm as a group as a whole type of a thing. So anyway, we were having a discussion about that as well, like when players leave something for periods of time. So like whether you go home for the holidays or whatever it may be. So but for you, as far as like your women's league, so when does your season start and end for the professional league that you play in? Is it consistent with the men's league or is it shorter?
Yeah, Europe's a bit weird. You have certain countries that play on one schedule, so it's usually a March to October schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you have the major European countries, so Germany, England, France, Denmark as well, where I'm at now. And we play this kind of August to June schedule. We do get a winter break, which is nice. I'm able to go home, see my family, my dog, and stuff like that. But yeah, you don't really get a ton of time off. It's really go, go, go for these 9 months.
Yeah, that would definitely be really hard. Does your family ever come over and visit you during that time, or is it kind of just sporadic whenever they have time to come over, if possible?
Yeah, so for my first year, it was really tough because of COVID. You could only really travel to Europe with a work visa, so
Mm-hmm.
that was a bit tough to be away for that long without seeing them. But
Yeah.
while I was studying or while I was playing in France, yeah, my siblings came over and my mom was able to travel. And she's trying to get out to Denmark, but I'm telling her it's a bit too cold, Mom. I'll see you in a month, but hopefully we can meet up in a warmer place soon.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Winter is a coming. I know I'm in Utah and so it was just snowing in the mountains. They just
Oh
did
wow.
their big announcement. We have this big pass that people can travel through for like I don't know, it's like 5 months when this after the snow has melted and they're able to move the snow off the top of the mountains. It's a pass from one side of a mountain to another, and they just closed it yesterday. So
Oh
you
wow.
can't drive on there because of all the snow that just came yesterday. So they're like, it's closed till next year. So that's kind of the one of the unofficial starts to the winter months, at least where I'm at. So um, when they so I know like because you were in on the East Coast, so like winter's here for me, and I know people in like the Midwest, like we get pounded with snow, and so playing outside isn't really an option. How was that for you, like as a youth player? Did you play indoor, or was it still? I mean, I don't certain areas. I'm like, I don't know where like the cutoff is like where you can still train outside in the winter months or because Arizona's right below us and it's like they can play outside all year long, basically. But up here where I live in Salt Lake, snow. It's our friend.
Yeah, no, I feel that. So yeah, I'm from Massachusetts and we get a bunch of snow each winter. And I play outside all year round. I always have. And they would have us shoveling the snow off the pitch before trainings. I remember back in the day. So I'm definitely not one to shy away from the cold or the snow. I'm not a huge fan of the wind, which was
Mm-mm.
prevalent in Iceland, but I can deal with the cold and the snow while playing. But of course, we did have some indoor facilities. But for the majority of the time, especially in the youth period, I was outside, which I think is great. You obviously have more space; it's more game realistic. But I do actually think people in a warmer climate, especially in the youth game nowadays, do have an advantage because they're outside, they're in a larger space, they're playing 11v11 on a pitch, touching the ball far more frequently than, say, a kid in Massachusetts who has a snow day and can't get on a pitch. So I do think there's a little bit of a advantage there, but I think my durability to the cold proves handy out here in Denmark.
That's good. Yeah. I know my son's team, we went to a tournament. I'm thinking it was early March a couple of years ago. We went down to a tournament in Phoenix. Maybe it was February. It was either February or March, but we were playing in a decent level tournament, and we there was kind of a team that's our age, my son's age, that is a really good team, and my husband wants to play their team. And we've always been put in this scenario like where when we're in the same tournaments, the only time we would meet them is in the final. Like and so like we were just at a tournament a couple weeks ago in Las Vegas, and again, the only way we would have met them was in the final, and we ended up getting knocked out by the team that won the whole tournament. Which, by the way, I am just going to say, for those of you that know what I'm talking about, that team looked like a bunch of 15-year-olds playing a bunch of 11-year-olds. So it was a little much. These kids were ginormous.
There's always one team that's like that.
Yeah, we were just like, who are these kids? They were huge. Like, and anyway, but anyway, we went to this tournament in Phoenix, and we were trying to explain to the coach of the other team that we wanted to play how we've been indoors. And so we haven't even played a game in like 2 months because we're inside. And he like couldn't grasp that concept because, they had just been at another tournament like 2 weeks ago. And we're like, yeah, we can't play everywhere. And it's so expensive to travel, during the off season, well, not the off season, but during the winter months, like to be able to get away and go play in these tournaments. And so we were trying to explain to them, because they're from Arizona, that we can't train outside all year long. So, and they couldn't grasp that concept because it is a huge advantage for those states that can train all year long versus the states where we have snow in winter and limited access to facilities. I keep saying that I want to open my own indoor training facility because we have like two or three, and the ones that we do have literally just do leagues all the time. So the
Hmm.
teams that need to train literally are training in elementary school gyms. Like,
Yeah,
that's where one of my teams is training this winter because we literally can't find an actual turf field to train on anywhere that's not like a 2 hour drive away. So,
for
I mean,
sure.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's really difficult for that. So I definitely feel like that's a huge advantage to teams and players. So over in Denmark, so you're kind of in the beginning, middle part of your season. How are you guys doing over there? How was that new adjustment? Because you just transferred to that team, right?
Yeah, so I was in France for a year and a half, and the football there is very particular in terms of its technical aspects, which I would say in my American playing years in college was one of my strengths is his technical ability. I was able to stand out because that's not really one of the dominant qualities in America. And so
Mm-hmm.
going to France, I was really excited to play with these players who were also technical. And then I got there and found myself at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of technical abilities. It was both awesome but also discouraging to be like, oh, I thought I was technical until I met these players. So was had a great time, developing myself and kind of yeah, improving on that aspect of my game. But I wanted to find a club that I was kind of that rarity again. So I was able to develop my technical abilities to another level. And then I wanted to bring that to a team that was a little bit deficient, let's say, in that technical aspect. And that's why I made the move to Denmark because they're much more like America in terms of their direct style of play. It's very physical here. And so a technical player would complement a team quite nicely. So that's why I made the switch. I also have aspirations of coaching professionally. And so it was really important that I started my coaching courses in Europe. And so I needed to move, although my French is pretty good, my friends say, I needed to move to an English speaking country. So I was able to kind of get a team and coach them and work on myself in that area as well. So there was both the footballing side and then coaching side in terms of reasoning for the move. And yeah, we're, I think, 11 games into our season so far. We have a new coach, quite a new team, and so we're still trying to figure it out a little bit. We've
Mm-hmm.
shifted formations. We're starting to find our chemistry and our footing, which is a little unfortunate because we only have a couple of weeks until the winter break. But in Denmark, the league's quite unique in terms of after the winter break, your top six teams are playing in almost like a tournament style playoff round. So you'll have 12 games. You'll play each team twice, or maybe 10 games, I'm not sure. You'll play each team twice, and then that's your championship. The bottom six teams are then fighting for promotion and relegation. And so, yeah, when we come back, we should be in the top six. I'm pretty sure we will be. But when we come back in January, that's when it really heats up, and we're all looking forward to hitting the ground running when that comes around.
That'll be exciting to be able to see where you guys end up and how you come. Especially like I know one of the teams that my husband coaches, it's kind of a rebuilding year for their team. They lost like 4 or 5 players to MLS academies, and so they're literally in a rebuilding year because they lost half of their starters. to other, to other clubs and things, which is a compliment to the club and the team and the players that they were able to pass them on to where they need to go. But it's also really hard for a team that was at a really good level, now is taken down a little bit of a notch, and they're starting to rebuild again where they were and trying to find that footing without those players there, because other players have to step up, and maybe if they've added in new players, the new players have to find their groove. And so it's definitely something that youth players go through as well as professional players, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I've gone through it at the professional level, but I went through it at Brown as well. And then before that, definitely at NAFC, we had multiple years similar to your story where some players left for so many reasons and we had to rebuild. And I think one thing that I've learned throughout those experiences, unfortunately, for someone like me who wants things to happen right away,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it can just take time and that's all it takes. So it's a it's a lesson in patience that I've had to endure for the last 4 times. But yeah, that's what I've learned from it.
And for those people that don't know, what position do you primarily play? I mean, I've listened to you guys talk about it on your podcast, and I think Sydney in her episode maybe mentioned it a little bit when she was talking about her position that she plays. But what position on the field do you play?
Yeah, so Sid and I are vastly different. Sid's center back, and I am primarily a 10, so the attacking center mid position. I like to go to goal, I like to create, and to my dad's dismay, I actually like to pass more than I like to score. So a true 10 in my book. But yeah, it's my favorite position, and if you listen to our podcast, it's definitely the hardest position.
Yeah, when I talked to Sydney about this was really funny. When I talked to Sydney about that position, because I also played center back or like a defensive midfielder. I like to be in the back because I like to be able to see the field and see what's in front of me. And we talked about how when you guys had a class together, she used to sit, because I said, when I go into a room, I like to usually sit at the back or have my back in a space where I can see everything around me. I don't like to be in the middle or at the front necessarily. And she was like, in this class, I used to sit over here on the side, but then Abby made me come and sit with her in the front, like in the middle type of a thing. So she's like, maybe you're right. Maybe because I was like, maybe it's like a trait that people have. She's like, maybe I did like to be over there, but then I changed a little bit, because I started sitting with Abby. So she was like, yeah, I guess I kind of did that until I started sitting with Abby at the front of the class. But I just thought that was kind of funny, because I wonder, like, if players, because I was like, I wonder if that's like a thing that other center backs have, like, or certain positions. Like, if you go into a room, do you go to is there a specific place that you're more comfortable in? And how does that translate to where you play on the field? Like, is it a thing, or am I just making this up?
I
So,
think that's a really interesting concept. I haven't actually thought about that too much. And it's funny that Sydney brings up that story because, yeah, this was at a point when we weren't really friends and we were obviously on the team together. So I was like, hey, like maybe we should sit together and like we're on the same team. So, and I was definitely not moving to the back. So I was like, Sid, get up here. And so that's actually what kind of spurred our friendship is that class. But in terms of your theory, I don't know. See, when I walk into a room, I'm very similar to you in terms of I like to see everything. I like to
mm-hmm.
be able to, face the people, face the action, which obviously pertains to attacking center mids. But in the classroom, I had terrible eyesight and I refused to wear glasses for the longest time. So my pure reason for sitting up front was I just couldn't see. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I also thought like, okay, I had to focus, and it was a lot easier to focus sitting in the front row. But yeah, we should poll some people and see what they think, how it pertains to their positions.
Because I've always been curious. I mean, because I can think there's like a math class that I took that I sat in the front, but it was also because like everybody else, like I was good at math. So I was like, I don't care if I sit in the front. I like math. Like this is an easy class. And so I'm like, I don't care if I sit in the front. It's easier to leave when I'm done with my assignment because then I don't have to walk past people. And so in that class, I didn't mind it. But other classes, I usually sit on the side or in the back, even though I'm short. Like, I remember in a Spanish class I was in, like, I would sit on my desk so that I could see over everybody else, but I would still sit in the back, but so I could see. over the other desks. But anyway, so I've always wondered like if people are like that positionally when they do stuff. Like, do you do it because I don't know, it's naturally where you go to, or not? Like, I don't know.
That we should start collecting like a data set for that. I think that's actually quite an interesting hypothesis.
I mean, I have no idea. I mean, it could be. I mean, I know like I've noticed now that my son is a goalkeeper, I've noticed more traits about specific goalkeepers, like the goalkeepers that I coach and things. And I'm like, some of them, not all of them, but some of them have some very specific character traits that stand out, but also make them a very good goalkeeper. And I can understand why they like the position. And so I'm like, I wonder if that's like a thing. Like, I mean, obviously not all players are created equal, and but sometimes I'm like, I wonder if a personality trait makes somebody a specific good fit for something else. But like, I always thought it was really funny because I was the captain of my soccer team. Both the clubs that I played for, or both teams that I played for, I was the captain. But it was because I was the most responsible player, and I didn't get a hot head, and I could keep calm and understood what was going on. Where other players, some of them would be erratic and play with emotion or things like that, but I would always kind of see what's going on. And so that was one of the reasons why I would be picked as captain. Or like when I did cheerleading, people called me the mom of the squad because I always had extra hair ties and I had extra this and extra that. And I'm like, I don't know, it's good to be prepared and make sure that you don't need other stuff. So that was also, anyway, I wasn't like the captain of the squad, but it's interesting, like certain character traits that bring out a type of a player. But that's, my son's doing like a science experiment or something at school. He has like a science fair that's coming up, but I'm like, man, I should have him do that as like a question, like, here's your thing, and you can only ask players like, when you walk into a room, where do you stand? Or when you walk into a classroom, where do you prefer to sit? Everybody's going to say the back. But some people like the front, some people like the
Yeah,
middle because they blend in. I don't know. So like my
that's an
one of
that's an
one of my
interesting
daughters
concept.
she likes to sit either on the side or in the back, and she's a defender. So, which I was that way.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I think he should definitely do that for his science project. I'm curious what you think. Like, do you think that it's the position that shapes the human, or do you think it's the human that falls into the characteristics of that position? Like, which
I
it's
don't
like the
know.
chicken or the egg, or is it both? Like, that's the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be either one because I'm like, I don't really, obviously, I don't really remember. I didn't start playing those specific positions until I was a little bit older. And then when I really started to associate the two together, I was obviously a teenager, and so I was like, huh, I wonder if that has anything to do with it. But I have no idea. No idea. But it's a good thought.
We'll have to see whatever. Hopefully, he gets an A on that science project, and we'll have to see what the data reveals.
Yeah, I'll have him whenever, well, he's doing a, what is it? His project right now is to deal with screen time,
Hmm.
and who has more screen time, boys or girls. And so and he's doing a data thing in his class. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll see how that checks out.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll
I
see.
feel I feel
Interesting.
like it's going to be heavy on the boy side, but that's just me. I mean, my
Yeah.
daughter, one of my twin daughters, she's like literally, as soon as she gets home, she also wants to play video games or be on an iPad or a tablet or something, and I'm like, "Whoa, back up. You're 8."
Oh
So,
my gosh. Yeah, yeah. Definitely get outside and yeah, I mean, this generation's totally different in terms of like TikTok
yeah.
usage and stuff like that, but um yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be an interesting outcome as well, gender specific.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. So, I was like, "So do I have to share your thing with people?" And he's like, "Nope, he's like, "I'm just doing my class." So I was like, "All right, perfect. Then I don't have to worry about it." So good luck with that. He's
Nice.
he's a very good he's a very good astute student. So his idea is that he's going to go, he hopefully will play, he wants to play college soccer.
Awesome.
We'll see if he sticks that out or not. And then he's a very responsible, smart young man, and will do great things. So
That's
he's
awesome. That's great. That's awesome to hear.
he's definitely one in a million right now. He's one that is, it's really hard. Like, I have a brother that just graduated high school, and my parents said that the which for somebody like me, and I'm assuming probably somebody like you, it's very hard to hear, but like the high schools were just happy if kids showed up to school because of the pandemic. Like, it
Right.
just kind of ruined people's perceptions on school. And so they were like, we're just happy if kids even come to school, let alone get them to graduate, which was really disheartening to hear because I'm like, come on, people. We got to get, you're going to be adults one day. You need to have a job. You're not going to live with your parents and play video games forever. Like, get off your butts and do the work that everybody else has had to do. Whether you do it at home, if you do online school or whatever, but at least, graduate or whatever. And so for him to be totally self-driven in the area that like most kids are not really I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like, they feel like the generation right now is not really big on going to school, and they're more on like TikTok or video games or whatever. And so he's definitely one that sticks out to me because he does that on his own. And so that's awesome for him to be able to want those specific things, especially like, I mean, when you play college soccer, you have to meet a specific GPA, right? Like if you don't make grades, you can't play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like the standard, well, first of all, to get into certain schools, you need to definitely do well in high school. And um, I don't know if they still do SAT scores and stuff like that. But yeah, throughout soccer, in school, you are dealing with essentially a full-time job, which is your football, and you
Mm-hmm.
also have school, which is a lot more self-driven, as you were just talking about. You're not in class 6 hours a day. Now you're in class 1 hour a day, and you have 5 hours of independent study to do. And so there's a lot of time management that goes into it. But yeah, you have to, especially through the Ivy League, which Sid and I both played in, you definitely have to maintain this standard GPA and make sure your grades are up there. Otherwise, you're not touching the field.
Yeah, so it's very important for people to remember grades do matter. So if you're thinking that you're just going to go pro, there's not a whole lot of people that are going to, it's a very small percentage of people that go pro, especially right out of high school. Um, so I mean, grades are definitely very important because once your soccer career is over, whether you play for a long time or maybe your career is cut short due to an injury or something like that, like you always have to be prepared for what's next. So, and it sounds like for you, what's next is coaching, like you said. So I've heard you talk a little bit about coaching. So are you coaching right now? Do you have a team that you're coaching right now?
Yeah, so at this club, they have an academy team. So the girls actually live here and play 5 days a week, which is a lot compared to the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm the assistant coach of the U16 girls squad here, and it's been really cool to see the differences in style and honestly, time that these girls put in over here compared to the US. I think there are a lot of pros and cons to both, but I think it's been great to add the skill set that I've developed here to my arsenal kind of while coaching in the US. I developed certain skill sets that I wouldn't have over here and then vice versa. So it's been a lot of fun and the girls are great spirited when I try and speak Danish and give them some Danish instruction. So it's been a blast over here.
Nice. And is their academy similar to like at least the academies that I've seen where like they live there and they go to school there and they train there, that type of a thing? Is that the type of setting that they're in?
Yep. So about half of the U16 girls live here, eat here, like they eat with us in the canteen. And then they go to school in town, but it's not at this specific facility. But yeah, they're here doing their lift programs 7 days a week. And then half of the girls do actually live in town or just outside. So it's about half and half at U16. But as you get up to U19, it's a lot more common for them to just live away from home and take on football full time.
That's awesome that they have a program like that in my area in Salt Lake. So they're bringing back the Royals, the
Nice. Yes.
the NWSL team that we had here. They left for a hot minute and now they're back. So they're bringing the Royals are going to be starting back up playing next year. I think is going to be their kickoff year again in 2024. But we have the boys academy program, and I would love to see like a complimentary girls academy program hopefully started in the next few years. I mean, I don't know how they would facilitate it, but that would be something that would be totally awesome. I mean, especially as a female coach myself, coaching girls and having daughters that I'm coaching, like that would just be awesome because my sons have that opportunity to play for the boys academy, and it would be great to be able to see a complimentary female academy as well. So that would be cool.
Yeah. I think it's about time that we find equality in the academy space. I think it's interesting to see sports in the US are quite diverse in terms of one individual player is probably going to be playing two sports at once. You know, a lot of players play basketball or they do dance. Like they always have some sort of complementary sport to their football.
Mm-hmm.
Where over here, it's actually they just play one sport. And I think there's advantages to that in terms of you're getting more touches on the ball. You're just spending more time on the pitch. You're learning these patterns more often. You're on the game more. But I do think there's a disadvantage that actually is an advantage in the US where while you're diversifying your sports, you're diversifying your athletic movements. And I think there's also, a higher injury risk when you're constantly performing the same athletic movements when you're just doing football. So if you're a multi-sport athlete, I do think you have some sort of intrinsic injury prevention built in, which I don't know what the mix is for US players. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do we go full-time academies or do we keep this model that we have that's multi-sport that yeah drives athleticism and prevents injury? I don't know where I lie on that, but it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I would be interested to see if, especially with one of my son's teams, their players are dropping like flies with random injuries over the last 5, 6 months. Just seeing different players come out with different injuries. Some of them do play other sports or have played other sports. Others, they're just, they're all consumed by soccer. And so that's kind of their one thing. And so it's really interesting to see. I mean, my they're also at the age where I'm going, is it because they're also growing and playing? And does it have something to do with the fact that they're going through growth spurts? Because, my own son who was on that team was having different issues. And I'm like, why are you waking up hurt every day? Is it just growing pains or are you really injured? Like, what's happening right now? Like, he's our oldest. So I'm like, I don't know. Totally
Yeah,
clueless, but I'm also like they're at the age where they're growing, so I'm like I wonder if some of their injuries could be related to this or that. Like I don't know. And when you bring that up, I did tons of different things. You also said that you played tons of different sports and activities growing up as well. And so I mean, I sprained my ankle at one point, and then later on I tore my ACL, but that was also because I found out I was pregnant the next day. So
oh
we
wow,
also think it kind of had something to do with that,
yeah,
possibly with
definitely
my
could
muscles.
be.
And so, but I wonder, like you said, people that focus on just one specific thing, like, because some kids have gotten like stress fractures,
Yeah,
from repeated use or whatever. So I wonder, that's another good hypothesis. Let's write these questions down. Let's
yeah,
find
yeah.
the answers to all these things that we have brought up today, and somebody write them down for us and get back to us and let us know what the answer is.
That would be brilliant. I do think there's a huge gap in the literature and the educational piece in terms of overuse injuries. Um, like we don't really know, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't sit here and say like, yeah, there were 100 studies done, or this is the reason why these kids are being injured. I think it's multifactorial. I do think within that same vein, we talk about in the women's game, like injuries on your period and during menstruation, different phases and things like that. And I do also think there's a lack of information and a lack of studies done in that space. So the injury sphere is really interesting to me. And really complex. I would love
Mm-hmm.
to hear some answers from your listeners on
Yeah,
that one.
I would also love to hear it. So if you know any answers to any of these questions or have theories about them, please let us know. I would love to hear them because I don't know anything about biology. My husband was a biology major, chemistry minor. He might be a great resource if I ever bring any of this up to him, especially since he's one that he can be coaching a game and a player will go down and he will know based off of how the player fell and was injured, like what is wrong. And there was a kid who recently broke his collarbone, and he's like, I can't remember if he was there or not when it happened, but he was like, if I had seen him, he's like, I would have made sure that, like, because the way that the coaches were like trying to move him on the field and everything, the player, because he couldn't communicate what had actually happened to him and how much pain he was in, like, the call could have prevented some possible additional harm that happened to
Right.
us. I don't know if anything else happened. I mean, it was obviously broken. It's really interesting to see the fact, like, he goes like, when you tore your ACL, I immediately knew that's what happened, like, you know and he's like, when so and so did this, like, I knew exactly what happened. Or he'll watch a player in a professional game and he'll be like, oh, that could be this, like, if they, and I'm always like, man, that's so weird that you can read how, like, the body, like, moves, and what it is that's probably injured on a player. But he also, like, he remembers, like, everything. So like, we'll be watching something and he's like a basketball game and or something, and our local team will be playing another team, and he's like, that's so and so, and then he'll spit out certain things and he goes, I don't know why I know that information about that player, but I do. And I'm like,
That's
well, it
great.
probably got brought up somewhere and you just locked it away in your brain. And I'm
Great
like,
memory.
I can't remember anything like that. I have a horrible memory. I'm one of those people that I could plan my own birthday party and be surprised. So,
No way. Oh, that's too funny. No, I mean, hey, that's great. You guys are great partners for each other then.
yeah, yeah. He can remember things that I can't. And I mean, we've also talked about, like, my memory is different than his memory. Like, I'm really good at remembering faces or names or something like that, and he remembers the opposite, so we complement each other. Like, when we see somebody, I'm like, I recognize that person, and then he remembers their name, and or vice versa. I don't know, it's pretty funny.
Perfect.
Yeah, we make a great team because I'm like, oh, it was this person. And anyway, it's a good time. So do you have any advice, Abby, for youth players of today that you want to share with any players or parents, or just general knowledge of the game?
Yeah, I guess I can speak to two different aspects of it. The first is the collegiate spot because I think there's this huge movement right now where youth players are just really focused on getting that D1 scholarship and going to the best D1 school. Um, and I think we lose track of the love of the game throughout all
Mm-hmm.
of that. Parents are throwing a lot of money into club soccer to get their kids in the right position to get to these schools. And yeah, I think it does a disservice to the game itself. I would encourage parents to and players to focus on your why. Are you really playing because you just want to get that D1 scholarship, or are you playing because you love the game? And
Mm-hmm.
within that same vein, if you do have the ability to go to a college, in that process, don't worry about anybody else's process. I think so often we look at others committing early or committing to this school, and if they're playing at this level, and people really need to look within themselves and understand that your process is your process. You have different needs, you have different values that can be used at different schools. So don't get caught up in other people's timelines throughout the college process. And yeah, try and enjoy the journey a bit. It goes really quick. So I can speak to the college process in that way. But I'll speak to the women's professional game in the other way. I would really suggest that young girls and even young boys um, follow their dreams. Like I was 5 years old and I wanted to play professional football. I had no idea what that meant. I had the naive idea that it was going to be easier than it was. But yeah, through a really good community around me, some luck, and grinding it out, I was able to achieve that goal. So those are kind of my two pieces of advice. I obviously run a podcast. It's called Megged, a women's soccer podcast. So we really want to elevate the women's game in general. And so, yeah, of course, I have to put a plug in for the women's game and that investment. And that really starts with consumers of the game. So fans, we have such a huge part in elevating the women's side, and that means listening to podcasts like yours, Katie, and watching every game you can and demanding streaming services and broadcasting to, yeah, fill our appetite and put this stuff on TV. So I'm really one for investing in the women's game and pushing it forward.
Yeah, when you bring that up, because like I said, the Royals are coming back to Salt Lake, and they just started. I think it was sometime in October they released their season ticket sales, and so they went on sale, and several of the people that I know they invested in getting season tickets, and I believe I haven't specifically looked into it myself, but when they first played here, they played at the stadium where the Monarchs play, which is like the MLS Pro team or what I forget what tiers there are on the men's side, but they played over in like a smaller facility, but I believe when they're coming back, they're going to be playing in the same stadium that Real Salt Lake does. So they're going to be sharing in the same bigger stadium. I mean, it's more convenient for people as well because the other stadium was a little bit more, it was further away from like a major highway and things. So I think it's going to be more accessible for people that want to go. But I have heard several people, like you said, they're investing in that game and they've bought season tickets. And so they're hoping that other people will invest in doing the season tickets as well. I'm very excited for that because then my daughters can see a professional team. My in-laws have season tickets to the Real Salt Lake team. So I myself have not looked, I haven't had time to look into looking at season tickets for anything. But that would be, I mean, just to be able to go to have access, even if I don't get season tickets, just being able to go watch the games now that my daughters are old enough and actually interested in watching it. Because when they were here before, they were little and they would not have cared to go. They had a playground. They would have been at the playground and wanting treats the whole entire time. They
I
wouldn't
mean,
have
that's
been,
classic.
yeah, they wouldn't have been interested in the football. So, having that be more accessible. And, I mean, one of the families that had considered purchasing part ownership of the Royals, it was a couple years ago, was Kaelia Ohai, who is married to JJ Watt.
JJ Watt. Yeah.
But she actually is from Utah. And so
Sick.
she started her soccer career here in Utah, and then I don't know what team she ever played on, but Kaylia, if you're listening, which I doubt it, but if you are and you ever want to come on the podcast, that would be awesome. But anyway, I mean, we've had a couple of great players come out of Utah. One of the players that played on the Royals, I can't remember her name, but she played on the U.S. Women's National Team. Before when they left, I'm trying to remember what her name is and I can't remember it, but anyway, so that was cool. And the women's team just had a game here in Utah. It was like the last Thursday in October. They played here. I was traveling out of town to a tournament in Las Vegas, so I wasn't here for that, but we had the women's national team was here. We've had them here a couple of times. We had the men's team here, I think once, maybe twice. But it's fun to be able to have like a soccer specific stadium now. And so we're generating a little bit more venues. It's not big enough to host like a World Cup game, unfortunately, which would have been awesome. But
Yeah.
just got to make that stadium bigger, guys. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, but it's so great that the women are getting that investment, and we saw from the World Cup that the audience is there. We just need to
Hmm.
provide a venue that's accommodating for the amount of fans that want to actually come and see them play. It's also a business endeavor. Like selling tickets makes money. And I
Yeah.
think as soon as business investors realize the profitability of women's football, it's just going to skyrocket even more. But it's so nice that yeah, Utah's back in the fold in the NWSL, and I'm excited to see A-Rod Amy Rodriguez, a former player, kind of lead them in the charge.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be great. So I'm excited to see them come back, and it's fun to be able to see all the different teams that are coming out, because I know that there's been a couple other expansion teams that have been coming around, and so that's fun to see it grow and being able to offer that to like players that I coach, for them to be able to see that there's different opportunities now that weren't there when we played. Or I mean, when I played, I mean, you're younger than me, but like when I played, these opportunities were almost non-existent. Like I've said before, I didn't really know that that was an option. I mean, it was a very small option, but it was an option, for players to be able to go and play professionally. But it's always great to see that it's expanding worldwide.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Boston's one of those expansion teams in 2025, I believe, which is super exciting to have football coming back to my home state. But in to speak to your thoughts about providing these opportunities, obviously in 2020 when I graduated, I didn't make it in the draft, and there were I think 10 teams or even 8 teams at the time. And so as we're adding these teams, we're also adding opportunities for more girls who have that potential and have that level, or maybe are right on the cusp to actually get into this first league in America and stay at home, and continue to play. Whereas on the men's side, they've always had this opportunity. There are 100 professional teams, and I'm not exaggerating that number, 100 professional teams for men to play at, in the U.S. Whereas for women, it's very, very limited. And so it's so exciting that we're expanding. And I'm very curious if we see a second tier,
Mm-hmm.
in the professional realm come for the women in the next 5 years.
Yeah. And with you wanting to be coaching, like, would you want to be coaching in one of those professional ranks eventually? Is that kind of what you want to do?
Yeah, yeah. The dream's to coach professionally, whether that's at a professional club or if it's kind of for those national teams that are finding themselves in the World Cup. That's the ultimate dream.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's difficult because in Europe, obviously, you have these huge names: Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, that yeah draw a lot of eyes. But I hope by the time that I'm coaching, the US will be on par with those big facilities, the big backing, the big names, and the passionate fans. Because ultimately, of course, I would love to return home, and coach there. But for the time being, my eyes are definitely on those big European clubs.
Yeah. And those are some great places to land as well if you can do that over there. I know it's a lot over there, like especially, I mean, the way that they've expanded. I know my husband was saying 10 years ago, if they would invest, if the men's clubs over there would invest as much time and money in the women's game, they would catch up to the US soccer. And
Yep.
it's happened, and
Yeah.
they've created these women's clubs and teams, and they've started to do that. So it's definitely something that, the US now kind of has to turn that on, and hopefully they start to figure it out as well, and we keep providing and producing good athletes and good players and giving them those opportunities. So it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting that Europe is starting to invest. Obviously, the US had a head start with Title IX. I think that really set the stage for our, what was it, 30-year reign as
Mhm.
one of the leading major players in the women's game. But like you said, there's been this investment in women's football in Europe. But I will say, after playing here for 4 years, I think we have not a misconception because there has been an investment from where it started, but I still see this huge, massive parity between the women's game and the men's game over here, especially in terms of just valuing, from the fans. So, like,
Mhm.
a women's team is always going to be second class to a men's program. But you are seeing, like, teams, as I mentioned, Arsenal, Man City, having this one team mentality, which I think is really beneficial and needed in places like France and like Spain, especially within the national team sphere. Obviously, for the World Cup, we've seen a lot of backlash from disproportionate allocation of funding to different men's and women's teams. So, while I do think, obviously, on the soccer side of things, Europe has kind of caught up to America, I still think there's such a parity or disparity, I should say, in the money investment and just sociological investment, if I could say that.
It's still it's still different culturally, like where, for those of you that live in the United States, like for girls to just go out and play on a soccer team and grow up playing soccer, like that's the norm. Whereas in other countries, it's not necessarily the norm. And so the U.S. is definitely still ahead in that aspect, where we're still expecting and producing decent athletic, female players, and producing top level players. Whereas other countries are still, although that they've provided it for them, it's still taking time for them to be able to do that. But it's awesome to be able to see the women's game growing internationally. I mean, there's been the girl that, and I don't know what her name is, I can't even think of it, but the girl that just won the Balloon d'Or for the female side, that came from the
Yeah.
Barcelona team, was on the Spain team in the World Cup. And so she just won that, and so that's awesome to be able to see her take home that award. So
Bonmati, yeah. She's insane. Her quality of play is out of this world. And yeah, I mean she's one of the beneficiaries of the investment in the Spanish team. Again, it's not even close to what the men are, but I think it's a great example of, with just a little bit of investment, look at how much reward you've gained. So
mhm,
imagine if we invested, okay, say that was 10%. Imagine you invested 50% of what the men get. Imagine how great the product would be then. So
mhm.
I think the growth is just exponential, and I'm really excited. And I think it's coming, but we need to push, and we need to keep the foot on the gas pedal on this one.
Yeah, and it's going to be great to be able to see what comes next for all the countries, and what they produce, and how they do, and how the U.S. responds with their World Cup run, and what we're going to do to change it and help it and fix it and grow it and all the things. They just announced. I can't, again, I don't have her name, but the lady that's going to be taking over the U.S. women's team. I'm like, I can picture her right now, and she coached at Chelsea.
Yep, Emma
And
Hayes.
yes, I'm like, I can picture her face and everything, but I can't think of her name. See, like I said, I can't remember names,
But you
but
know
I
the
can remember
face.
faces. But you guys
Yeah,
can't see
she's
what I'm looking at. But anyway,
no, you knew
yes,
it. You knew it.
yeah. So she's going to be taking over the U.S. women's team. So that'll be interesting to see how she comes in, and what she does, and what she changes, and what she keeps, and everything. So it'll be interesting, especially with the players that are, have retired and left the national team, and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see the new era of the team and how that progresses.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Emma Hayes to. I mean, I don't think I'm not sure if it's official yet, but I mean, she's coming.
Yeah.
She's a coach that I look up to constantly. I think she's one of the first on the current game who's just tactically a genius. She really focuses. Obviously, she has the emotional side of it down, but in terms of her tactical prowess, her ability to change the game with a single substitute is world class. And I think it's something that we were missing in the last 4 years throughout that cycle. But I will mention, I think a lot of the US's issues comes from what we were talking about before, a lack of academy system, how the youth system is pay to play. You lose a lot of good players through that system. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see if they change the Olympic development program, or the DA program, however it is now these days. I'm curious
Right.
to see if that feeder system is reorganized to more match the European side of things.
Yeah, because there's definitely an. I know it's probably not something that people would love to talk about, but the oversaturation of leagues and which league is better. And it's always a question on the Facebook groups that I'm a part of for parents. What league or team is better? Is it this, ECNL, I don't even know all, EA or
There are too
GA,
many.
or yeah, I'm like, I can't keep up with all the acronyms, and so it's very interesting to see, like, how will the US do anything to help combat that, because you do lose good players or good teams or whatever, because they're stuck in a league that maybe insert, because that's one of the other things where they're some people will answer the question and they're like, well, if you live on the East Coast, this league is better, but if you're on the West Coast, this league is better. Or, so it's also like a regional thing, like,
Yeah.
in regards to what clubs put what tier team into what leagues, because maybe the club is in every league, and so they put these different teams. So it's really just interesting to see how that navigates, because it's it's a thing.
Yeah,
I will.
it's
It's hard to
insane.
navigate.
It's absolutely hard to navigate. I coach a lot of kids at home individually, and yeah, I hear parents talk about this all the time, and it's one of the most frustrating things for me because, like I said, we have to go back to our why. Like, why are you playing on this team versus this team? Is it status? Is it convenience? There are a lot of factors that go into it, and it's frustrating because I think we get caught up in the politics of different leagues and different clubs. I'm someone that never played for an elite club, or ECNL was the highest when I was playing. Um, yeah, I think it's a difference in a lot of times money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you're not really seeing a huge gap in level. Um, but if we could go back to giving advice, I would love to say, your focus should never be on the politics of what a team's status is. It should always be about, can this coach develop my child in the way they need? And that really includes emotionally. I would probably elevate emotional development higher than actual football development, especially in the US. I think that's crucial. But yeah, for parents listening to take a step back and really um, look at the situation without those rose-colored glasses about ECNL, DA, all of these different leagues. Just find the right place for your kid, find the right level, make sure they're challenged, and make sure they're developing emotionally and football wise. That's the best advice that I could give.
Yeah, I've heard over the last little while. There's it's a whole dramatic thing in my state, and I don't want to call anything out specifically, but there's a situation where young athletes are being pulled in multiple different directions by different teams and clubs, and whether they're affiliated with USU soccer, US club soccer, or something totally different, and what regulations they have to follow. So there have been players that have been, to me, misguided as far as like a car salesman's pitch that they've been
Yep.
given, because they want to be a part of this shiny new thing. And honestly, I don't know that it's going to be best for their development, but it's, what they want to do because they're seeking, well, their parents. I mean, I don't necessarily think that the player understands what's going on, because a lot of the players are just young, like, I mean, like 7 or 8 year olds.
Right.
And they think this is an awesome opportunity, and, they're trusting their parents to have their best interest at heart. And I hope that whatever they become a part of, that it doesn't ruin their development. But what I have seen has definitely not been an amazing situation. But the things that they have probably been promised, or the access or abilities to things that people think are important, versus proven results that other clubs and teams and coaches and things in the area can provide and have a proven track record of. Um, that's the thing, is I'm like, if you're going to go to a good school somewhere, you look at their history. You don't just look at what shiny thing do they have. I don't know how to explain it, but it's really hard it's a really hard situation, and to be able to see and give people that warning, as far as like, don't go there. But
Yeah,
ultimately, it's your decision, and whatever happens happens. But if the pitch is too good to be true, it probably is.
for
Because
sure. Yeah.
I mean, total cliches. The grass is not always greener, those types of things. But I've definitely, there's, and unfortunately, because of the regulations and things that these people don't have to follow, it just keeps tearing a big hole in the soccer community in the area that I'm in. And I've actually seen posts similar to what's happening here in other areas. And which, again, it's just creation of more teams and ripping people apart. And money, money, money for them and the fame and the glory. And it's not necessarily about the players and the development and the emotional and stability and things that they probably need at those ages. It's just seeking a trophy or whatever, you know? And I mean, it's hard to see, like, I mean, like I said earlier, my husband's team had a bunch of players leave and go to MLS academies because that's what they do. They produce, you know, that's the ultimate goal for these players is to get drafted or not drafted, but they sign with these academies and they get to go there and to be able to see the progress that they're making and the development. And you know, that's my husband's jobs. He's like, that's my job, is to develop these players to the next level so that they're ready to be able to go to the next level. And so being able to provide that type of a environment and scenario for them, and then having to rebuild that team is, you know, kind of what the job is. And so for those players that don't necessarily understand that, that's kind of what it is. It's a progression. Like, you have to take the steps to get to where you're going. It's not going to be immediate. Like you were saying, it's an exercise in patience. When you're building a team or building a player, it's not an instant process. It takes a long time. It took you a long time to become a very good player. And like you said, to go and play professionally in another country, and then you go there and you find out maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. You
Yeah,
know, you were the,
exactly.
like, it's what I don't know if it was somebody else on the podcast, but basically when you go and play college soccer, you know, you might be the best player on your team, but then when you go play collegiate, you're going to play with some of the best players from other teams all over the country or all over the world, depending on where they're coming from. And so you have to be ready for that, that scenario, and be ready to be able to put the grind in there and do that work. So anyway, I don't know what the point of that rant was, but
No, I think you tie it together quite well. I think the marketplace for youth soccer, currently US is really distorted, and it does a disservice to players who are going to play at the next level because they're so used to, you know, jumping from team to team and getting that immediate satisfaction or immediate star status. Whereas in reality, especially in the higher leagues, that's just not the case. And so it's really setting our players up to fail, but also the landscape and the money-driven pay-to-play narrative that plagues youth sports in America is killing our professional pool. Really,
mm-hmm,
it really is, because when you have these different clubs competing for money rather than developing kids, yeah, you lose a lot of talent. Um, you know, you siphon off the kids that can't afford these high level clubs, but also you're not getting that pure technical development that you are getting over in Europe. And so when you measure an 18-year-old from the US to a player in Europe, it's really incomparable in terms of their technical and tactical awareness.
mm-hmm. We had a player that just went over to Spain, and his mom was telling me how the coach, you know, was saying that out of so many US players that go over there, for him to be able to like slot in and actually be able to stay up to the same level, you know, even though maybe he wasn't at the time like one of the better, I mean, he's only been over there for a few months, but he basically said that when US players come over here, usually they can't hang when they come over to whatever, you know, club or wherever they're at over there, because of the way that they're coached or taught or whatever. And so so when this player went over there, they were like, you know, he actually has been coached properly so that he can, you know, even though he still needs to catch up in certain other areas, at least he's been taught specific things so that he can still manage on there, and he's been able to stay over there. Whereas, you know, they have a player go over there and then he can't hang, and so, you know, 2 weeks later he's back home in the United States from wherever he came from. And so you know, it takes a lot of work. I mean, and that kid, you know, he would train so much on his own and everything, even outside of practices. So, I mean, it definitely takes a certain amount of grind for players that want to be able to play professionally. You can't be lazy. It's,
Yeah,
you got to work
certainly.
hard. You have to work hard. And so, work at it. Work. Just
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
at it.
I think that's like the bare minimum is putting in effort and not being lazy. I think that's like a given, especially if you want to achieve professional status. But to your point about these players from the US going over to countries like Spain, I think obviously you have that developmental aspect that we were just talking about. But one thing I think that the US culture just doesn't have at all is soccer IQ. Like, and that can only be driven from watching the game. Obviously, at home, we have a lot of different programs to watch, NBA, NFL, and so all eyes aren't on soccer. Whereas in Europe, football is their number one sport.
Mm-hmm.
Every child from age 3 is constantly watching the game, and so they're obviously going to pick up these tactical movements from players and just the feel, if I can say, of the game. I think that's yeah, evident evidently lacking in the US game is just this intrinsic soccer IQ that doesn't even need to be taught in Europe, but certainly is not being taught in America.
Yeah, and that's been some of the advice that other guests have given, just watch as much soccer as you can, because by watching it you learn so much as well, whether it's watching it on TV or going to a game in person. So it's definitely important to be able, I mean, even just rewatching game film. A lot of people have access to VOs or Trace or whatever, those types of things where you're able to go back and watch your game film. And so if you're able to go back and learn and see what's going on, that's also a big help, being able to see what the ultimate goal or ultimate picture is, because I know that that's something that I definitely wasn't able to go and do, but now, like I said, I have a professional team that plays inside my city, and so we can go to a game almost anytime that we want to, go watch the professional team play in our area, or we have plenty of collegiate teams that play at a good high level, going and supporting your local collegiate teams, things like that. So it's definitely good advice, is being able to have that soccer IQ and knowledge and awareness of what's going on in the game. And I know Sid and I were talking about, she talks about how she tries to prevent. Is that what it is? Like, she tries to, I think that was one thing that we were talking about, or maybe it was on one of your episodes, like how she tries to see what's going to happen, whereas you're like making it happen, I think is
Yeah,
kind of
she's
what,
like preventative, I'm reactive in so many ways.
yeah, based on the positions that they play on the field. And so, which I'm kind of that way too, like, being able to see, okay, if that person passes the ball there, then where am I going to have to defend, or am I going to have to step here? Who needs to mark there? And blah, 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 making sure things are where they need to be. And, it's definitely, I mean, it's, especially with the young athletes, that I'm trying to coach, it's interesting. I had a parent that one time, I was like, telling players, because my players are very young and obviously they move out of position all the time. So, like on a set play or something, I'm telling players to move back a few steps or move right or left or something like that. And a parent was like, and it might have been one of the assistant coaches, said to the girls on the bench, have you noticed that every time she's told people to move, that the ball goes right where she told them to go? Like, you guys need to pay attention to that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess maybe not every time, but a lot of times, like, off of a corner kick, if the ball bounces out, and then it's most likely going to go to this space, like knowing where you need to go, type of a thing. And soccer IQ is definitely something, like, especially with the women's game, teaching players to be able to read the game is different. And coaching boys and girls is definitely different. I help coach boys, but I primarily coach girls, and going from one to the other, sometimes, I mean, the boys, a lot of times they can just kind of run their own trainings, but like, the other day at my training, my players were like, can we start? Like, I had set them up to do like passing exercise, and I was just like, yeah, why do you have to wait for me to say go? Like, you should have already started like a minute ago. Why are you guys just standing there? Because I was still helping get another grid set up. And anyway, so it's definitely different, and it's a learning process, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But if anybody, I mean, we could probably sit here and talk forever. But if anybody is interested in listening to Abby and Sid on the Megged Podcast. Give them a listen. I'm going to link them in the show notes. They're going to be coming out with season 2. I don't know. Do you guys have a date that you guys are shooting for that you're hoping to get it out by?
Yeah, we're finishing editing and we have a lot of new things coming up for the podcast. So we're getting all of those things sorted. But in January, we should be coming out with our season 2 of Megged, a Women's Soccer Podcast. We're super excited for that. So definitely give it a listen. But thank you so much, Katie, for having me on, and Sydney as well. It's super exciting to collaborate with someone that's also trying to elevate the game that we love so much.
Thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely link your notes and link your show in the notes. So check out Megged Podcast. And Abby, thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks for kicking it with me, and have a great day. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at kickitwithkatiepodcast _ between all the words. You can reach out to me with questions at kickitwithkatiepod@gmail.com. I also have a feature with SpeakPipe where you can leave me your own voicemail message if you want to be featured on the podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.